no way, shape, or form ever contemplated that the sub-agency within DHS that was really focused on securing us against the cyber threats and other threats to our infrastructure would ever be used to violate the Constitution the way it was used to violate the Constitution under the Biden administration. This administration has been completely opaque. We do not have the information to know and the communication in terms of what all happened here. So my question relates to how they misused SISA. Will you commit to providing the transparency, providing the information, investigate it yourself, but provide this committee, my subcommittee, the information to expose the truth to the American public, but even more importantly, propose a piece of legislation based on our investigation, based on those results, to fix it so that no administration can ever misuse the language of the law to commit that kind of unconstitutional act and violate.
This may look like a standard confirmation hearing, but it's actually a stress test of how much unchecked authority a federal system can absorb before accountability disappears. What's really being tested here is whether institutions designed for protection can be redirected without consequence, and whether Congress still has the tools to pull them back. This raises broader questions about constitutional limits, transparency, and what happens when emergency powers become routine governance. In this video, we'll break down how this exchange reveals deeper tensions between law and authority, and why the outcome matters far beyond a single nomination.
Governor Noem, welcome, and thank you for your willingness to serve. You'll be taking over a massive federal government agency, 240,000 employees. It's probably too massive. I think had I been there back then, I don't think I would have assembled these 22 different agencies in this massive department, but that's what we've got. It's a department that the previous administration, I think, has completely misused. Instead of using Customs and Border Protection to do that, to protect our border and secure it, they've utilized those resources to incentivize a massive influx of illegal immigration. Instead of using the Cybersecurity Infrastructure Security Agency to do that, they instead engaged in mission creep and utilized it to censor Americans with the Misinformation Board. I am concerned about disaster relief, just federal disaster relief in general, creating greater and greater and increasing levels of moral hazard, resulting in higher costs of these disasters. So let's cover each one of those kind of in order. How do you gain control over a massive agency whose resources and personnel have been misused? I mean, how do you root out those individuals who, instead of securing our border, opened it up and facilitated this?
Well, Senator, this has been a big topic of conversation in most of the meetings that I've had with the members of this committee was how do we fix this agency, which the reputation is that it's broken and dysfunctional. I think that was the question I get asked the most is why would you want to head up such a dysfunctional department? And I would say that because the mission of the department is to secure the homeland and our people. It's our biggest vulnerability right now. And we have a president that's not enforcing the law. And I don't believe the law should be unequally applied. Everyone wants to be subject to our laws, and a nation without laws and without borders is not a nation at all. So I will work by ensuring one of the things that Senator Ernst talked about, people have to show up for work. I think there's going to be a majority of people who don't have their primary mission to secure the homeland, that if they don't want to show up for work, then maybe they're just not truly passionate about protecting America. I think they need to do that, and they need to recognize what their job is. The morale in DHS is very low. I'm going to let people do their jobs. I'm going to remind them what their jobs are. Some of these Border Patrol agents haven't been able to do their jobs for a very long time. They've been processing paperwork and facilitating an invasion when they should be back securing our border, which is why they were recruited and wanted to serve there to begin with. We're going to build partnerships with local law enforcement, with ICE and task forces. So we're communicating again with local sheriffs and mayors and law enforcement to partner together. When you talk about the fact that this is such a broken agency that needs so much improvement, a lot of it goes back to why were we created and are we fulfilling that mission and making sure that these individuals are getting back on task.
So under my chairmanship and under the Trump administration, we did rename a part of DHS, the Cybersecurity Information Security Agency. I in no way, shape, or form ever contemplated that the sub-agency within DHS that was really focused on securing us against the cyber threats and other threats to our infrastructure would ever be used to violate the Constitution the way it was used to violate the Constitution under the Biden administration. This administration has been completely opaque. We do not have the information to know and the communication in terms of what all happened here. So my question relates to how they they misused SISA. Will you commit to providing the transparency, providing the information, investigate it yourself, but provide this committee, my subcommittee, the information to expose the truth to the American public, but even more importantly, propose a piece of legislation based on our investigation, based on those results, to fix it so that no administration can ever misuse the language of the law to commit that kind of unconstitutional act and violate people's First Amendment rights.
Yeah, Senator, I look forward to working with you on that. And I think what we saw during the COVID pandemic, the actions of SISA, their misinformation and disinformation campaign, the materials they were putting out was shocking. Shocking at what they were doing to decide what was truth, what wasn't, and how they were trying to manipulate the American people. We saw it in elections and Russia influence as well. And so ensuring that they can't do that in the future under any administration would be a priority, that they stay doing what they're supposed to do and hardening our systems and working with local officials to do that is a priority. And I'd look forward to working with you on legislation should you wish to rein them in.
So the first step in that process is to expose the truth, to find out who these bad actors were, expose who they were, hold them accountable. I mean, that is crucial that we take that first step. So again, look forward to working with you on that. You know, the tragedy of the California fires, the more we learn, the more we understand that not only was it predictable, it was predicted, which means it was preventable. Again, you're not going to be, you can't prevent the initiation of those fires, but you certainly prevent them from raging into the tragedy that they became, the dozens of people who lost their lives, the hundreds of billions of dollars worth of property damage. It's not just California, though. I mean, again, that was grotesque mismanagement. That could have been prevented. You can't prevent a hurricane. You can't prevent floods. But you certainly can try and start reducing the moral hazard that we've allowed to explode, quite honestly, by the federal government rushing in immediately, no questions asked, just tell us how big a check you want. What can you do in your new role to try and start reducing over time the moral hazard that we have created in this country with federal disaster relief?
Well, Senator, emergencies and disasters are always locally led. They're led by the local communities and leaders, and that's because they're much more responsive and much better informed on how to bring relief and to get those emergency services there to meet the need. Then it's state supported and federally resourced, which means that when we come in, that we're supporting what the mission is, what those emergency operations and plans are that the local city and county and then also the state has implemented and do what we can to fulfill the mission of our programs. One of the things that FEMA's not doing today that I think we should be doing is streamlining communications. We saw this in New Orleans. We saw it in other terrorist attacks in the country. And you just referenced it as well about the American people not getting the truth, senators not getting the truth and the transparency that we need, is that I believe FEMA can always put out a blueprint for what a response would be should something terrible happen. And when we look at the Secret Service, what happened in Butler, we saw that communication was an issue, that the Secret Service wasn't communicating and balls were getting dropped with local authorities, local law enforcement. And we can put forward a blueprint for how communication can happen and be streamlined between the federal government, the state, and the local entities so that should something happen, this is how we talk to each other to make sure that the public has the facts, they're not getting misinformation, which happened with the New Orleans terror attack just recently, but also up in Pennsylvania as well. That blueprint is what we do at the state level that FEMA has failed to do, to proactively educate the public on what everybody's roles are, what we do should something happen, whether it be a natural disaster or a terrorist attack or an emergency response is needed, that we can put out those blueprints ahead of time, educate people, train those local entities, which they currently do to a certain extent today, but not good enough to really know that not only can the resources be pre-deployed in many of these situations so that they're more readily accessible, but also how are we going to communicate and make sure everybody's on the same page so that we can be much more efficient. I wish that we would have had different leadership and a different governor in California, or we might have a different result there. But in the Department of Homeland Security, we can do all that we can to make sure that the people that live in California know that they're going to get a response from the federal government that's appropriate. And we did all that we could to make sure that they had the information ahead of time so they could protect themselves when they do have a failure in leadership like we've seen.
Well, thank you and good luck.
You bet.
Since Senator Johnson...
What we just witnessed in this hearing was not a routine exchange. It was a moment of confrontation that cut directly to the core of federal power and accountability. When Senator Ron Johnson looked across the dais and asked Kristi Noem how a leader can root out those inside a massive agency who redirected its mission, the room shifted. That question was not about staffing charts or management theory. It was about responsibility. It was about whether a government created to protect the public can be reclaimed once its purpose has been bent, redirected, and blurred. This exchange exposed something deeper than policy disagreements. It revealed a growing fracture between the idea of government as a neutral guardian of law and the reality of government as an institution shaped by human decisions, incentives, and avoidance of consequence. Johnson's framing was deliberate. He did not ask whether the system failed by accident. He asked whether people inside the system actively participated in steering it away from its mandate. And in doing so, he forced a larger question into the open. When authority is misused, who is held to account? Kristi Noem's response leaned into a moral argument rather than a technical one. She described an agency whose internal morale is depleted, whose personnel have been diverted from their original roles, and whose mission has been diluted. Her language was revealing. She spoke not of abstract failures, but of people no longer being allowed to do the work they signed up for. That distinction matters. It reframes the debate from ideology to integrity. When institutions drift, it is often because clarity is replaced by convenience, and purpose gives way to compliance. The discussion around transparency and oversight sharpened that theme. Johnson pressed on the misuse of authority within cybersecurity operations, arguing that tools designed to defend infrastructure were redirected toward controlling narratives. This was not presented as a partisan grievance, but as a constitutional concern. The implication was stark. When agencies operate without sunlight, trust collapses. And when trust collapses, the legitimacy of governance itself begins to erode. Noem's agreement on the need for investigation and legislative reform signaled an acknowledgement of that danger. She pointed to moments in recent history where agencies stepped beyond their lane, deciding what information should be amplified and what should be suppressed. Whether one agrees with her assessment or not, the significance lies in the admission that boundaries were crossed. In a functioning system, such admissions trigger correction. In a broken one, they are ignored. As the hearing expanded into disaster response and federal relief, the same pattern emerged. The conversation turned to moral hazard, to systems that unintentionally reward mismanagement by absorbing consequences at the national level. Again, the underlying issue was not resources, but responsibility. Who plans? Who communicates? Who answers when warnings are missed and coordination fails? The testimony suggested that failure is often predictable, not because outcomes are inevitable, but because accountability is optional. This is the connective thread running through the entire exchange. Whether discussing enforcement priorities, information control, or emergency response, the question remains the same. Does leadership exist to confront failure or to manage its optics? Johnson's insistence on exposing facts before proposing reform reflects an older principle of governance. Truth precedes trust. Without a shared understanding of what went wrong and who was involved, reform becomes performance rather than solution. What makes this moment resonate is that it mirrors a broader national unease. Many Americans no longer argue over individual policies alone. They question whether the systems enforcing those policies are acting in good faith. They sense that accountability flows downward, but rarely upward. Hearings like this one matter because they pull those concerns into the open, on the record, where evasion is harder and silence is noticed. The gravity of this exchange lies in its implications. A government without clear mission becomes reactive. An agency without accountability becomes defensive. And leadership without transparency becomes untrustworthy, regardless of intent. The hearing did not resolve these tensions, but it illuminated them. It showed that restoring credibility requires more than new directives. It requires a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, identify failures without euphemism, and rebuild systems around their original purpose. As this chapter of the hearing closed, one reality became clear. Power, when left unexamined, drifts. Authority, when unchecked, hardens. And institutions, when insulated from consequence, lose the confidence of the people they serve. The path forward is not silence or denial, but exposure, reform, and vigilance. This is why moments like this matter. They remind us that democratic oversight is not a formality. It is a safeguard. It is the mechanism by which trust is either restored or permanently lost. And it depends not on rhetoric, but on resolve. If you believe these questions deserve continued scrutiny, if you believe accountability should never be optional, and if you want to see deeper analysis of the forces shaping American governance, support our work. Subscribe to Liberty Report USA.